Welcome to Signature Series Pens. I'm Peter J. Redding, and I return exotic woods to and remind people of their innate brilliance. This is the final product of this project, is to create 60 1-inch 7mm brass tubes. And so I begin with a 10-inch brass tube. You see 6 of them here. And the object of the demonstration is to cut these into 10 segments each for a total of 60 1-inch tubes that I'll be utilizing in a demonstration of 14 different types of woods and 2 blanks of each that are 4 inches. So I'm going to put in a 1-inch segment at the end of each so that it's easier to turn. The jig that you're looking at there is an Anaconda tube saw, and it comes with a series of jigs. This is a 7mm jig that the 7mm tube will go through, and it steadies it, it evens it up, keeps it parallel to the saw blade, and it's got a small slot on top of it so that you can actually clamp it down tight. I won't be utilizing that particular element of this insert jig, but I will clamp it down so that it will hold the tube at a 90-degree angle to the blade. So you see me tightening up just slightly there, not all the way, because I want the tube to be able to slide through it easily. I'm going to I have the saw clamped down to my workbench, and I'm also using the clamp as a stop. So I've pre-measured this to be at basically 7/8 of an inch so that I can get a nice even 10 segments of tube out of, or brass tubes out of each long 10-inch tube. You heard the click there, indicating that it's at exactly the right. And with the jig there, and I'm pushing and holding it steady from the other side, I can rapidly go through the cutting of 60 segments really quickly. And again, I'm wearing my glass goggles to protect my eyes from flying brass, as well as any chips or dust that might come up off of the brass. So you do that, in this case, 6 times with the 6 different 10-inch tubes, and you end up with a whole bunch of little brass tubes. And you're going to see in a segment coming up, there's a little flash that's the end of these things. And the saw blade, when it's going through, will cut through the tube, but it leaves a little bit of a flash or a chad that dangles. And so just making sure you police your brass. I haven't used that since the Marine Corps days. Making sure that all the places that it flew on the floor and under the bench are collected. But you can see a whole series of almost 60 there. I'm not using all 60 of them, so set some aside. These are going to be used in 14 different types of exotic hardwood species, and I've created 4-inch blanks, 2 out of each species. And these will go into, like I say, 1-inch pen blank glued into either end of it so that I can turn it on a 7-inch or 7mm mandrel. And you'll notice here, I'm trying to point out the little flash that might be on either end of the tubes that got cut. You can see it just a little dangly there. And it's important to take that off, clean it up, and so that's the next step of the process. So I have a grinding stone here that I use for my chisels, and it's also very handy for preparing the brass tubes. You also see a file there that is probably the handiest, lowest cost tool that I have in my workshop. I think you get a set of about 8 of these in different shapes and sizes. But I find this round one, and you'll see me using a flat one here in a moment to clean up these brass tubes, making sure that the internal diameter is clear. If you got a little flash that comes into it, just do exactly what I'm showing here. Just rub it a little bit, comes right out. Brass is a real easy metal to work with. It's very malleable. And the chad that's hanging off on each side, each one of these has that little chad of varying sizes, but I scrape it back across the stone so that the round portion that I'm indicating there is clear and clean, and the chad is sort of hanging off the bottom edge, if you will. And it only takes a second to do that. I'm prolonging it here just for explanation purposes, but just have it at the back side of the stone as you drag it across, ensuring that the outer diameter is clean and the chad is just hanging off to the, if you will, the back edge of it. And that's the next step in this process. So again, I go through this 60 times. I'm not going to take you through all 60, obviously, but you get the idea. And quick and easy and clean. The next stage of the process, I go to my 7mm mandrel, and it's about 8 inches long, the mandrel itself. So I have a bushing at the end of it there. I've got 2 on there now. There's 3. I'll end up getting 7 of these on the mandrel. And I'm careful not to rip my thumb or my skin with the chads that are hanging out. So grab them by the middle of the brass tube. Put on 1 or 2 bushings at the end, whatever, space is allowed there. Tighten up my mandrel saver. And then I take that flat file and I'll go across this and just pay particular attention to the areas, the chad areas. You can actually see them. They show up pretty easily. Making sure that you wear your eyeglasses again, just to make sure that you're protecting your eyes from any flying pieces of brass. One note of caution here is that as a wood turner and a pen turner, I have a proclivity to go down there and see the smoothness with my finger and thumb like I'm doing right there, only with the lathe on with a wood piece, a wood blank. And you do not, I repeat, you do not want to do that. Put a sign up if you have to, but do not do that with a lathe turning with these brass tubes, because if it's not completely removed and completely smooth, you will rip your thumb and finger a good measure. And I can knock on wood, I have not done that. So, but I could almost feel the intention of going down there and touching it to see if I had smoothed it off completely, and you do not want to experience that if they're not. So again, you do that 10 times. Here I'm giving you a different angle. You can actually see those little chads hanging there, 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 and there's one more at the end there. So it's real easy to see where they are. This little file, I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this. I don't want to go through the brass tube, obviously, but I do want to give enough pressure so that I can remove those 6 or 7 chads smooth it out. Again, do not put your finger up there to make sure you got it all, because that's not the way you want to discover that they're not removed. The two brass tubes at either end of the mandrel, you want to turn the brass tube so that the chad is on the interior. You do not want that up against the bushing, just so you have easier access with your file to get at it. And again, I give it an extra scrape so that I rough it up a little bit, but only after I've shut off the lathe do I go in and make sure, again, very gently. You don't want to aggressively rip your finger and thumb down the tube mandrel to see if you've got it all. Give it a good rough up. Give it a little more texture for the CA to grab onto, and when you glue them up into your pen blanks. I think I probably did 60 of these individual 1-inch brass tubes all together. The cutting process, setting up the jig for cutting off the 7/8 of an inch each one, putting them on the lathe mandrel here, removing the chad, filing them down on a stone, probably, certainly less than an hour. Just a quick, fast, easy way to get really a high quality brass tube. And so there you have it, 60 brass tubes ready to go. This is Peter J. Redding at SignatureSeriesPens.com, returning exotic woods to and reminding you of your innate brilliance.